In the early 1870s, the world seemed a lot larger, the wilds more mysterious and forbidding. My name is John Sinlay, and I lived those days with a roughness in my bones and a restlessness in my soul. My homestead was set on a vast expanse of flat land, a stretch of the earth so wide and open that the sky seemed to press down close enough to touch. My two daughters, Elizabeth and Haley, were the lights of my life in that isolated place where trees were sparse and the wind had free rein over the grasslands. Our home was a sturdy log cabin I had built with my own hands, a testament to the rugged life we led. We raised sheep, and plenty of them, their bleating often the only sound filling the silence of our secluded existence. Life was simple, dictated by the needs of the land and the rhythm of the seasons. One warm autumn afternoon, after the day's chores were done, I lay in the grass, the warmth of the sun a gentle weight on my eyelids. It was a moment of rare peace, broken only by a distressed bleating nearby. Opening my eyes, I saw a lamb limping, blood trickling down its left leg, marked by the unmistakable imprint of a predator's teeth. My heart raced with a mixture of concern for my flock and a burgeoning excitement. There was nothing I loved more than hunting wolves. Not only was it a way to protect my livelihood, but in those days, a wolf pelt fetched a handsome price at market. I had become known in the area as a skilled hunter, with more wolves to my name than any other man I knew. Grabbing my rifle, I stepped into the twilight that clung to the edges of my property, where the shadows of the few scattered woods began to deepen as the sun dipped low. The hunt exhilarated me, a primal pleasure that quickened my pulse and sharpened my senses. As I ventured further, the familiar landmarks faded into a sea of unfamiliar territory. Normally, this wouldn't concern me. I had a good sense of direction and a hunter's instinct for tracking my way back. But as darkness enveloped the woods, a creeping doubt began to shadow my confidence. The deeper into the forest I went, the more I felt an unsettling shift in the air. It was then that something otherworldly caught my attention. Small white petals floated in the air around me, glowing faintly against the growing darkness. They moved as if guided by an unseen hand, beckoning me forward. Intrigued and unable to resist, I followed the trail of petals, hoping it might lead to a shelter or perhaps a poacher's camp where I could rest until dawn. The petals led me to a small clearing, a circle perfectly cut out from the trees. The sight that met my eyes tore a scream from my throat before I could stifle it. Bodies hung from the branches, suspended by thick burlap ropes around their necks. The scene was macabre. Some of the bodies were little more than skeletons, while others were disturbingly fresh, their deathly pallor illuminated by the strange glow of the petals. In the heart of the clearing, amidst the horror, a small silver rose caught the moonlight, its petals shimmering with an ethereal light. Everything about it screamed of danger, yet it promised something irresistible. As I drew closer, the air around me thickened, and the rose seemed to whisper directly into my soul, offering everything I ever desired. The temptation was overpowering. I reached out, my hands trembling as I touched the cool petals. A wave of sorrow, deep and agonizing, crashed over me. It was as if every regret, every loss I had ever suffered, came surging back, amplified to an unbearable degree. The despair was so intense, it drove me to my knees. In that moment of overwhelming grief, a dark thought whispered through my mind, fueled by the insidious promise of the rose. The nooses hanging empty around me seemed to offer a singular solution to end my torment. Driven by a despair I could neither understand nor resist, I placed my head through one of the nooses. Climbing the tree, every fiber of my being tensed as I prepared to let go, to end it all in the hopes of silencing the pain. But as I dropped, the branch snapped, a sudden and jarring halt to my descent. I landed heavily on the ground, the broken rope still around my neck, but alive. Dazed and confused, I lay there until dawn's light filtered through the trees. The intense sorrow had lifted, but the silver rose still lay clutched in my hand. It was both my tormentor and my savior, an enigma wrapped in silver petals that I could neither discard nor fully understand. As I stumbled back to my homestead, the first rays of the sun did little to warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones. My daughters ran to greet me, their faces etched with worry and relief. I could not bring myself to tell them the truth of that night, the horror of what I had witnessed, or the dark allure of the rose that I now hid within my coat. That day, I returned to my bed, haunted by memories and clutching the cursed flower that had both nearly killed me and inexplicably saved my life. As I lay there, the rose's whispers grew fainter, but its grip on my soul only tightened. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a descent into a madness that would threaten to consume not just me, but everything I loved. As the days stretched into weeks, the silver rose never left my side. Its presence was a constant whisper in my mind, a murmur that filled the silent spaces of the night. My daughters noticed the change in me. My once clear and lively eyes now often looked distant, clouded with an inner turmoil that I struggled to hide. Elizabeth and Haley, wise beyond their years, watched me with a mix of concern and a growing dread that something sinister had taken hold of their father. The rose, for all its beauty, was a source of deepening shadow in our home. It whispered of desires and dreams, yes, but also of dark things, secrets that man was not meant to know. It became my obsession. Every moment away from it felt like an eternity, every second in its presence a sweet poison that I willingly drank. The need to possess it, to protect it, became more powerful than any rational thought. It was during this time that I noticed my connection to the land and my animals waning. My once cherished sheep now seemed distant figures, their bleating a background noise to the rose's incessant whispers. One evening, as I wandered among them, the lamb that had been attacked weeks before came limping up to me. Instead of the usual pity or concern, a dark impulse surged through me, an impulse that terrified even as it thrummed with a wild, primal power. The days grew colder as autumn waned, and the sun's light became a rare commodity under the heavy gray skies. It was on a particularly bleak day that I found myself standing outside, the chill biting through my clothes, watching the sheep huddle together for warmth. The lamb limped towards me, its innocent eyes unaware of the darkness that churned within me. Something snapped. The rage, the madness that the rose had nurtured within me, exploded in a fury that I could neither control nor understand. I grabbed an axe from the barn and, before I could comprehend the horror of my actions, I had slaughtered every last sheep. The field, once a scene of pastoral peace, was now a grotesque tableau painted in crimson. As the frenzy faded, I stared at my hands, red with the blood of my own livelihood, the shock of what I had done slowly setting in. Panic gripped me, followed by a profound sorrow. What had I become? What monstrosity had I allowed into my life, into my soul? The realization that I could harm Elizabeth and Haley in a moment of madness terrified me more than anything. I knew then that I had to protect them, not from some external threat, but from the very man who should have been their safeguard. On my 50th birthday, I called them to my room. My hands shook as I spoke, the words heavy and pained. I am dying, I lied, and it's time for you to leave. Go. Live somewhere far from here, somewhere safe from what I am becoming. The confusion and hurt in their eyes tore at me, but the fear of what I might do if they stayed hardened my resolve. They protested, tears streaming down their faces, but the urgency in my voice and the desperation in my eyes convinced them. The next morning, they left, taking only what they could carry, leaving behind the only life they had ever known. Alone now, with only the rose for company, I felt a new purpose take root. To prevent my darkness from touching another soul, I began an arduous task. Around the house, I planted trees, creating a barrier, a forest to shield the world from me and me from the world. I planted oak, ash, pine, any seed I could get my hands on, each one a prayer for redemption, a plea for isolation. As the years turned, the trees grew tall and thick, a living fortress that cloaked my sins and my shame. But as the forest grew, so too did the corruption within me. My body began to change, grotesquely mirroring the decay of my soul. My eyelids withered away, leaving my eyes exposed and glaring, a constant, unblinking watch over a domain of shadows. My lips receded, giving way to a grimace that never faded, and my hair, once thick and vibrant, fell out in clumps until my scalp was as barren as my heart. In the solitude of my self-made exile, the rose continued to whisper, but its voice was no longer seductive. It was a chain, a shackle that bound me to an existence I no longer wished to endure. Yet, there was no escape from the creature I had become, a creature that some would later call the Bubbajax, a ghoul of the West Virginia forests, a tale told to frighten children and warn the unwary. As I lingered in the twilight of my monstrous transformation, haunted by memories of sunlit days and the laughter of my daughters, I clung to one hope, that the forest would keep me hidden, that my sins would be buried beneath the roots of the trees I had planted, and that no one would ever suffer at my hands again. As decades passed, the forest around my homestead thickened into an impenetrable barrier, its dark canopy blotting out the sky. Inside this self-imposed prison, time seemed to twist and bend, the days bleeding into each other, marked only by the slow decay of my humanity. The whispers of the silver rose had grown faint, like echoes of a distant past, yet its grip on my soul remained as tight as ever. In my isolation, I often wandered through the twisted groves I had cultivated, my grotesque form a shadow among shadows. My mind, once sharp and clear, was now a murky pool of thoughts, occasionally stirred by memories of my daughters, Elizabeth and Haley. I wondered if they had found happiness away from the cursed land that had claimed their father. The thought that they were somewhere safe, living lives untouched by the darkness that consumed me, offered a rare comfort amid my torment. As the years stretched on, the legend of the Bubbajax began to take root in the local folklore. Tales of a tall, thin man with a hideous expression, dressed in a red and black plaid shirt and blue jeans, circulated in hushed tones around campfires and in the dim corners of taverns. Some said he was a ghost, a specter of vengeance roaming the woods. Others believed he was just a tale, a myth to scare children into obedience. But none knew the truth of the man, the father, who had become a monster through a cursed twist of fate. Despite my efforts to isolate myself, curiosity and the foolhardy bravery of youth sometimes brought the occasional trespasser to the edges of my forest. My heart, such as it was, clenched with fear whenever I spotted an intruder. The instinct to protect, To keep them away from the evil that I had become was overwhelming. Using the paths I knew so well, I would herd them away, my eerie visage and the chilling sounds of my movement through the underbrush enough to send them fleeing in terror. One foggy evening, as the last light of day struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, a young couple wandered too close to the heart of my domain. The panic that seized me was sharp and immediate. Not since my daughters had left had humans come so close. Hidden by the thick fog, I watched them, my breath, if I still breathed, held in apprehension. They were laughing, the sound bitter and jarring to my ears, used only to the silence of the woods. My approach was silent, the years having honed my ability to move unseen, unheard. But as I drew closer, a small, silver locket fell from the woman's pocket, catching on a bramble. Instinctively, I reached for it, the action stirring a deep, almost forgotten memory. The locket was intricately crafted, much like the rose that had doomed me so long ago. I hesitated, my gnarled fingers brushing against the cool metal. Inside, I found a photograph of two smiling women, their features hauntingly familiar. My heart, long thought dead, twisted in my chest. They were my daughters, Elizabeth and Haley. Tears that I hadn't shed in decades threatened to fall. The realization that my daughters had remembered me enough to pass down this image, perhaps as a warning or a keepsake, was both a solace and a spear to my soul. In that moment, something within me shifted. The presence of the locket, a token of my daughters' lives continuing beyond my cursed existence, rekindled a flicker of the man I had once been. With trembling hands, I placed the locket carefully back on the path where the woman would see it, making sure not to be seen. Retreating into the shadows, I watched as the couple, sensing perhaps the chill of the unknown, quickly retraced their steps and found the locket. The relief and joy on the woman's face as she embraced the locket to her chest was a sight that carved itself into the remnants of my mind. That night, as I returned to the depths of the forest, the whisper of the rose was a mournful dirge. I realized then that my time was nearing its end. The transformation, the isolation, the endless night of my existence had reached its zenith. I was tired, so very tired of the darkness, the solitude, the endless torment. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I made my way to the clearing where it had all begun, where the bodies had once hung and where the silver rose still thrived, untouched by time. With hands that shook with more than just the cold, I dug at the earth around the rose, my intent clear. With each handful of dirt, I felt a release, a lightening of the burden I had carried for so long. And when the roots of the rose were finally exposed, glistening in the weak sunlight, I pulled it from the earth. Its whispers died as its roots left the soil, and a profound silence fell over the forest. Laying the rose down, I felt the last of the darkness drain from me. My body, so long a prison, finally felt light, unburdened. As I lay down beside the withered rose, the forest seemed to sigh around me, the trees bending slightly as if in farewell. My thoughts drifted to Elizabeth and Haley, to the lives they had lived beyond the reach of my curse. A smile, the first in countless years, touched what remained of my lips. As the sun rose, casting light over a land freed from the darkness of the Bubbajax, John Sinley's tormented spirit finally found peace, nestled in the heart of the forest he had grown, under the watchful eyes of the trees that had shielded his darkest days.